Hey everybody, real late show, Chris and Craig. I'm Chris, got Craig with me. If you're watching this on YouTube, you maybe I promise you, Craig and I did not call each other beforehand. We both got the black shirts on today, Craig.
Yeah, well, mine's like dark blue, but it
Oh,
looks
dark blue.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a very dark blue. It looks black though.
Right. I mean, I didn't institute like a dress uniform for our show or whatever else. I mean, we're here. It just struck me as we came on screen here. So, okay, lots of stuff we can talk about today. Craig, this happened last week. We weren't able to meet, but wanted to kind of go over this again because big news. We've talked about this a ton. We finally have full details about ESPN streaming plans. It's going to be called ESPN. How about that?
Yeah, very creative.
Yeah, how innovative is that? Kind of what we've been talking about before too. You'll be able to watch live all of ESPN shows. I think you can pick, like if you say, hey, I want to click on ESPN, you click on ESPN. But I think it's going to be kind of like with Netflix where everything's in categories. So if you say, hey, I want some NFL content, you can see what NFL content they have and other stuff like that. So I think it'll be a lot more detailed than just 8 boxes with each of ESPN's channels. You can click on it. I think you'll have a little bit more interactive options for there. There's still a bunch that we don't know. ESPN Bet, there's going to be some integration with that. There was some talk about how do we get some user content on there. Nothing has been specifically mentioned on that. I would assume they're looking for more programming. We hear rumors that they may combine forces with NFL Network, maybe Red Zone. That hasn't officially been announced yet, but I would think that you're always looking for more content. But here's the bottom line, Craig. Price $29.99 a month.
Yeah.
There's going to be some offers. Apparently, for the first year, you can combine ESPN with Hulu and Disney for $29.99. So they're offering you some deals, but really the big question is $29.99 a month. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised by this. It is a pretty solid value, I suppose, if you're like a sports head that just has to have access to every single kind of offering. And it will include ESPN Plus, obviously, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, the networks like SEC Network, ACC Network. So I get, it's a pretty solid value. I don't know that it's for me right now at this point. $30 is a lot. Now, obviously, I do have Hulu and Disney and that bundle, so maybe it would be something I could consider as an add-on. But, I think for me right now, it's probably a pass, but maybe in the future it might be something that I decide to pull the trigger on. I think with, the idea of $30 a month, you're thinking about it from a cable perspective and how much you spend on cable. And it's probably like for most people that are only sports fans that get cable because they want to watch live sports, it makes some sense. But I also feel like I don't remember exactly how much it was going to cost, but the idea of how much that ESPN, Turner, and Fox bundle was supposed to be, I can't exactly remember how much it was. I think maybe 40 or 50 at the time when they were talking about that. So it's probably a little higher than I was expecting, although I'm not surprised by the $30 price tag. It just might not be for me right now.
Well, and I think the thing is the sports programming has diversified so much. Just think if this was available 20, 30 years ago. I mean, ESPN was the centerpiece of almost everything. I mean, you had your baseball, your basketball coverage, you had everything else. Now, ESPN still probably is the leader compared to others, but there's some things that ESPN has a lot of, some things they don't. I think about it like if you want Big Ten content, well, ESPN doesn't currently have the Big Ten contract, so you probably want to look elsewhere. If you're a big SEC fan, oh yeah, I mean, get this, because not only do you get ESPN's contract with the SEC, you get all the smaller SEC games too. So I think instead of saying, "Are you a big sports head?" it's almost like, "Hey, do you like the SEC? Do you like NBA? Do you like Monday Night Football?" I mean, that's where if you can say yes to that, you might say, "Hey, this might be a good thing." But if you like baseball or wrestling or some of the things ESPN really doesn't have, yeah,
Right.
it definitely isn't for you. You know.
Yeah, I think that's the problem right now is that everything's kind of becoming spread so thin. Like you mentioned, the Big Ten contract is spread out among a couple of networks with Peacock, NBC having stuff. You also have CBS/Paramount Plus that has Big Ten network, Big Ten games. So there's a lot of things that you almost have to have in order to be able to say, I can watch every sports game that I want to. ESPN does go a long way in allowing you to watch a lot of games and watch a lot of different sports as well, which I think is also, a factor for some people is, maybe they want to watch, baseball, Mid-American Conference baseball, right? And that's where you can find it on ESPN Plus and, for more of those niche kind of sporting events where people really just like watching their alma mater play or whatever. But yeah, you're limited in terms of, you get the Monday Night Football game, but you also don't get Sunday night or Sunday football. So you always need to have other services or basic cable in order to watch those games, unfortunately. So, there's probably never going to be a perfect situation because everything has become spread out where, basketball is going to go from Turner over to Amazon. And I think NBC also is going to have some games as well. So it's really just kind of to the point where you almost have to have every streaming service anyway, a la cable. So it's kind of becoming that now.
Yeah, and I think Fubo has a great opportunity now because Fubo was apparently behind the suit that kind of eliminated Venue. That was the
Yeah.
service that would combine some sports together. And I get it. Was upset because they say, "Hey, if you allow this to happen, we're done." Because one of the things that we offer is we offer a lot of these sports channels. Okay, so I get it. I mean, yeah, I would rather see Venue. I probably would have gotten Venue if it came out. But I get Fubu's being ticked off. So Fubu has got a great opportunity now because part of that court ruling said you can offer skinny bundles. So if I'm Fubu, if I can get someone subscribed to my $100 a month service, I'll do that. But for me and probably you, we'll never do that. So why can't Fubu come back and say, "Hey, let's offer this skinny bundle"? You know what I mean? They can offer a bundle of just channels that have sports, and I think everyone would go for it, right?
I would think so. But then again, if they do that, isn't that the same thing that they were trying to block to begin with, is offering a sports channel only where it's a combination of multiple channels coming together? Now, obviously, Fubu has their own little thing and they're allowed to do it, but it's kind of like they're blocking one thing to kind of do this similar thing on the other side where maybe some people that want the sports channels don't want to spend $100 a month on Fubu itself. So then maybe they can spend $8, $15, $25, whatever for their sports package, which kind of becomes the same very thing that they were trying to block to begin with.
Well, the difference is Fubu would have skin in the game. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Fubu doesn't make a dime if Venue happens, but Fubu can do it. They can do it, and in my opinion, I think this clears the way for Fubu to do it. Now, it's going to be probably $50 a month if Fubu ever does this, but that's something to consider. And Fubu pays for the programming, and stuff like that. So if they do that, I'm sure some of that monies will go back to ESPN or TNT or whatever. I mean, it's something to think about. And, you might say, well, then what does ESPN do? Well, ESPN you get for $30 a month. I'm sure Fubu would offer for 50 or 60. Now you get more channels with Fubu, but I don't know. I mean, it still is a lot of money. I'm not sure if I'd spend $50 a month on sports, but if you want to get me in the game, I think something like that could work. Now, will I do it? Who knows? It depends on what my budget looks like whenever it gets announced. Yeah. But I think we're getting closer. And again, I get Fubu's concern But if you have that concern, then offer something. Offer something that'll help. I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Everything costs money. It's like, in politics, everyone argues about healthcare. What's the best healthcare plan? Well, healthcare plan costs are going up. Same way with what we talk about in sports, programming costs go up. So no matter how you present it, if you go from cable to ESPN streaming to these other packages, the costs are going to keep going up no matter what. You're going to spend more either way. So it's tough. Wanted to bring this up, Craig, and I don't think I've said the word American Idol in a long time. But I thought this was interesting. I was at work Sunday night, Craig. I got a chance to write a little bit. So I like looking at Google Trends. It's a service where you can see what people are searching for around each area. So I live in Columbus, Ohio, work in Columbus, Ohio. I did a search, and I'm like, whoa, American Idol is one of the top searches. So I start looking at it, and we're an ABC affiliate, so we have American Idol on our network. You can see it on our newsroom as we're doing work. It's one of the screens that's up. I didn't realize American Idol had its finale. I mean, half of me was like, wow, why is everybody searching for this? But American Idol had its finale on Sunday. I'm seeing here, Craig, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know if he's pop, rock, metal, kids music, but Jamal Roberts is your new American Idol winner. And, thinking about this, and believe me, if you've come here for big American Idol analysis, turn this podcast off. We're never going to be like that. But, Craig, it made me think. I had not thought about American Idol in a long time. I've seen clips of the recent ones. I think Luke Bryan's on it. Katy Perry was on it last year. I think Carrie Underwood's on it. But, man, is it? I guess it's so popular, right? I mean, it used to be appointment TV that everybody was watching, and now, I don't know. It sounds like it still has a buzz, right? A little bit, or
yeah, I think it's probably kind of gotten drowned out by the marketplace because you have other, America's Got Talent, The Voice, other competition shows that have kind of overtaken it a little bit, and it's funny because obviously there have been quite a few successes from the American Idol family, and I think it's kind of like a testament to the idea that, it still kind of does churn out some stars, and, this guy might be the next star, who knows, but, I think it's just kind of been oversaturated in the market with all the other shows that are out there that are competition based. I think it's been challenging maybe for it to kind of maintain that like elite popularity that it had when it was like the only show out there for people to watch, as far as competition singing shows go. So, I mean, it's a testament that it's continued to succeed. And, obviously it went away from Fox and then it went to ABC, and it's obviously there's got to be a market for it because it's still out there and it's competing against other competition shows. And, I mean, it's good to see that, you're all, I think the benefit of these shows is when you see success stories, like when Carrie Underwood, of course, won the show like 20 years ago now, which is crazy to think. Kelly Clarkson obviously being on the show. So, I think that it's the show works best when people succeed from it. So I think, and that's all competition shows. Like if you're going to have a competition singing show, you want to have these people go from the show and transition into stardom in the music industry because it helps validate those shows. I think in American Idol, probably, I would say arguably has the most validation because it has created some of the biggest stars because that show happened. Kelly Clarkson or Jennifer Hudson or people like that, Carrie Underwood, that go on the show, and whether they win it or not, they're shot into stardom, and it helps really kind of put the cherry on top to make that show credible. And I think that's probably why it's lasted 20 some odd seasons now.
Well, in every reality show, and believe me, every TV show, you've got to tell some type of a story. It doesn't matter if you're news or entertainment or whatever. It was funny because I think it was like 7 years ago when I was working with the Columbus Dispatch. I went to cover. They had a preliminary American Idol tryout, and it was at a park in Columbus. The hosts weren't there. This was like the round beforehand. So if you do well, you get invited back to like the finale training or tryouts, I guess, before the real competition happened. And it was funny. I got to talk to a producer of a show, while I was there interviewing people. And I didn't know this. With Simon and American Idol, Simon Cowell, the big thing was you had goofballs go on that thought they were great, and Simon would rip them to shreds, and we all think it's funny, haha. Yeah. And the producer looked at me and said, "No, we don't do that anymore. We're not making fun of people." So apparently, and again, I've seen clips over the last couple of years. I can't really interest either way, but apparently it's more of let's get a good story, either someone who gets their break or someone that can sing pretty well but isn't quite for it, and we just tell their story. It's more emotional, not like, haha, let's make fun of you. It just, I don't know, it's kind of a weird vibe a little bit. I guess, too, I don't know much about Luke Bryan. I mean, I guess he's all right. Carrie Underwood, I guess the thing with her is you bring back a former winner, and now, everyone can identify for a story, and that's cool. And then Lionel Richie, how about that? Lionel Richie is now a reality star.
Yeah, I think the show does succeed more. I mean, there's some people where they're not very good when they're singing, so you don't really probably need the extra commentary on how bad they are from a judge. And I think kind of shifting into the maybe it's just not for us kind of a letdown instead of making fun of someone is probably better. And then you get the star power like they've had Lionel Richie and Carrie Underwood and Katy Perry, people that people watch and people like and people listen to. So I think it kind of helps bring a different audience to have Lionel Richie there and have different stars every year, whatever it may be. And I think it's the kind of show that really caters to a wide audience, and there's always that. The storytelling is what hooks you. Like you get to know these people, you care about them. And that's when a show like American Idol or The Voice or whatever it may be becomes more than just some trashy reality show.
Well, you kind of wonder too. I mean, I think part of Simon was he could just make fun of people. And maybe part of the problem with American Idol in the past was you bring people to Simon and maybe they really think they're okay. And then when you go in there and you think you're okay and you don't do well and Simon makes fun of you, maybe it turns a little bit mean. Not that Simon's mean, but these people really come in there thinking, hey, I think I'm going to be great. And they sing and they get made fun of. I don't know. We're in a different part of society, and this is where I'm revealing my age. I'm an old school guy. I used to love Don Rickles, before he passed. And Rickles will make fun of everybody. Now, maybe the difference is Rickles made fun of a lot more of a celebrity pop culture type, and maybe that's more okay than, you're Simon Cowell and you're making fun of random people that come in thinking they can sing okay. You know what I mean? Celebrities kind of understand that sometimes they're going to get made fun of and teased, and maybe that's why overall Rickles got away with a lot more than maybe Cowell and American Idol did. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Good for Jamal Roberts. I don't know. I don't know much about him. You look at past American Idol winners. Carrie Underwood, obviously, she did well. Man, I'm trying to think of, wasn't there like a rocker like David Cook or somebody? I mean, he did some stuff.
Yeah, I can't think of a lot of. I mean, obviously, I'm not their target audience, and I don't usually watch it, but I've watched it before. And I mean, I know some of the big players from there, like Carrie Underwood and Jennifer Hudson, Kelly Clarkson and Adam Lambert, those types. But yeah, I don't remember a lot of the. I really stopped watching probably after the 5th or 6th season, I would say.
We had an infamous interview. I actually had Clay Aiken and Ruben Studdard on, and that was probably one of the higher, reviled seasons for American Idol. It was funny during the interview. Yeah, they like talking about American Idol because that's how they got to know each other. They were going on tour together, so they were both on the call with us, and it was fun talking to them. But it seemed like after a while they got tired of talking about American Idol. So it's funny, these people, American Idol makes you popular, but then you've got to kind of brush off the American Idol because if you're just known as American Idol contestant or winner, it kind of holds you back a little bit. It can be kind of rough at times. So I don't know. I mean, it is a show. It's a reality show. I guess it is what it is. The finale of American Idol, and believe me, we just had it on in the background. I was putting news together. I really wasn't watching a ton, but I shared with you a story here. Jessica Simpson, who 15 years ago used to be the thing. She was like a real big pop star. She's gotten away from it, but she came back and sung American Idol. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, you always wonder sometimes people fade into obscurity, and I think it was more of a choice on her part, like to kind of fade off and not do music for a while or whatever. And I think she raised a family and stuff like that, so that might have been a big part of why she hadn't been in the spotlight. But it's kind of always fun to see. You hate to say nostalgic acts because 15 years ago is not that nostalgic. You think of years and years and decades ago, but yeah, I think it's fun to see people kind of come back and get their chance to kind of recapture that glory.
Well, and apparently, she's once bought new music. Good for her.
Yeah.
And I like that. And again, I'm putting my TV hat on now. I'm a producer in the TV news field, but you have producers on these shows and other stuff too. How do you get buzz for your show? Hey, if you like American Idol, you're going to watch the finale. But how do you attract new people? And good for American Idol. Now you've got something that we can talk about. You know what I mean? So I like the fact that you're doing new things. Now, let's be honest. I'm sure Jessica Simpson, for the article, she has new music. Why does she come back? Because she wants to promote new music. So good for her. But good for American Idol to bring back somebody that will get people who, like us, who normally don't give a rip about American Idol to talk about a little bit. So,
a chance for Jessica Simpson to use a platform to get back out into the public spotlight too. So it's kind of a big part of it for her. It's both entities kind of helping each other there a little bit.
Yeah, let's just get creative. Let's don't bring back whoever the current pop star is for the 100th time. And again, the older we get more retro anyway. So we kind of get excited to see some people that we liked when we were a little bit younger, come back, which is kind of cool. With Tom Cruise, the new Mission Impossible movie is coming out. When does it debut? I keep hearing about it, but I don't know when the debut date is.
Well, it'll come out. First screenings will be on Thursday, the 22nd, and then it'll be fully in release on the 23rd. So, big holiday weekend for the movie with high expectations to the point where they need to make a lot of money to make a profit. Does Paramount here? So, a lot of expectations, and this is the final, at least Tom Cruise led maybe Mission Impossible. And, obviously this is a guy that's now in his 60s, and I think he's kind of riding off into the sunset as far as like high level action movies go. And this is going to be sort of an end of an era for this filmmaking series that started 29 years ago, or no, I'm sorry. About 29 years ago. It was almost 30 years ago that the first Mission Impossible debuted with Tom Cruise leading the way. And they've kind of had a sporadic churning out of them at times, but for the most part, they've had a lot of success.
I kind of think, I know, CGI played a role of Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones, but this can't be it for Tom Cruise. I mean, we always hear this hype about how he does his own stunts, and everyone's amazed at him. Are we going to see Tom Cruise running around when he's 80 doing stunts?
Probably not. I think he's not retiring by any means as an actor. I think he's just kind of taking a step back from these types of stunts. I mean, I would imagine, he's broken a foot before on set with these Mission Impossible stunts. And I think he's finally finally kind of the mindset like it's time to move on, and maybe, I've had my 8-film run in this series and I've had a lot of success, and now I think in his, twilight years of his career, I think he wants to focus more on other projects and maybe more challenging acting projects so he can, kind of go out on top there. And obviously he's changed the game for stunt work, and especially among actors doing their own stunts, he's definitely changed the game. But I don't know that this will be the last action movie we see him in, but I think this will probably be the last Mission Impossible movie, and it will probably be his last really major, like, I'm going to do all these crazy stunts kind of things. Because at the same time, even though he is in shape and he looks ripped for a 62-year-old man, I think he probably realizes it's time to slow down a little bit on that.
But do you think there's hype? I mean, good night. I'm not in the greatest of shape. I'm 50. I'm kind of feeling it. I don't know. Every time you hear Tom Cruise, oh, he does so much. He's so amazing. And, you're kind of wondering, is he the best athlete of all time? I don't know. To dip my toe in politics a little bit, we've seen about Joe Biden. Like a couple years ago, they talked about how amazing he was and how active he was. And now we know he's got some, just aging issues. Now he has cancer, sadly. We hear this about Trump now. Oh, he's great shape. He stays up all night. He works all day. The guy's 78. I don't think it's a cover up. I think we overhype some things. I'm wondering if the same thing happens to Tom Cruise. I know he does well. I know he is a great stunt guy, but do we overhype him so much? I mean, I think sometimes we could talk so much about somebody, or we kind of, I don't know, pushing the envelope a little bit on what's really true or not.
Well, I mean, obviously he's 62, and I think for him,
all right, we lost Craig a little bit. He should be back shortly. But let's talk a little bit about Tom Cruise. And again, I don't think it's a big conspiracy necessarily, but I think with Tom Cruise, it's kind of funny. Is there a little bit too much hype?
I think to a degree, and I think the last few movies have kind of lost a lot of steam in the franchise. They haven't really made that much money. This is a movie that is among the most expensive movies ever made, and I think they're trying to sell this as kind of Tom Cruise's last big major, action movie, so they can hopefully make money, because they need to overhype it. They need to hype up the stunts, because this is what these movies have become lately, where it's what has Tom Cruise done lately in the stunt world, and they really hammer that point home when they're advertising this movie, where sometimes you get back, especially if you're in the theater, you might get featurettes on the behind the scenes making of these crazy stunts that Tom Cruise does. So I think Paramount is really trying to hype this one up because they need to. It's a $400 million budget, which means more or less they probably need to make $1 billion just to break even and make a little bit of a profit. And up until this point, I think only one Mission Impossible movie has made over $800 million. So the hype is real because they need it to be real. They need to hype this up. They need to get it out in front of people's eyes. Tom Cruise has been pretty active lately in terms of promoting the movie theater experience, and I think that they're really trying to hype this up, even if it's, we know it's not his last movie. We know that he is making more movies. He's just going to, step back from the big action blockbusters, or at least the Mission Impossible franchise. And I think if that's the case, then that probably kills the franchise for the time being, until they decide to maybe reboot it in 5-10 years with a new actor playing Ethan Hunt. But because I think there's money to be made. It's just in a series like this, I think they need to go back to the drawing board and maybe try to find a movie that they can produce for a little bit less than $300 or $400 million, because these movies just aren't making the type of profit that you would hope for in an action series that's been going on for 29 years.
Do you remember the hype about Top Gun 2 or whatever. I mean, it was like right in the middle of COVID. We were bummed out. COVID was bumming us out. We're all home and everything. It was the first movie, Craig, I saw where it was like everyone was giving it, oh my goodness, this is the greatest movie of all time. Which again, nothing against Top Gun, nothing against Tom Cruise. He's a great actor and everything. The hype train just went out of control during that movie. It was crazy.
Yeah. And it made $1 billion. I mean, it was a very profitable film. And, it was the pleasant surprise. I mean, I think they expected it to do well, but I don't know that they expected it to make $1.4 billion, which is, again, probably why it might be a little challenging for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning to make $1 billion. But, I think what it did for me, too, was it kind of, in a little bit of way, restored Tom Cruise's box office success. Like, he's always been a movie star. He's probably the last movie star, honestly. He and Brad Pitt, maybe. But Tom Cruise is probably like the last movie star where it's like box office, it's big money, it's word of mouth. You've got to see the new Tom Cruise movie. But I also think, too, though, at age 62, his audience isn't really the same as it used to be. Like, and maybe it's because of the personal stuff, or maybe his beliefs and things like that people don't care about. And maybe that's why maybe he's not quite integrated with the younger audiences that don't care about who Tom Cruise is, because they didn't grow up in that era of action blockbusters with Tom Cruise as the lead. They grew up with Marvel and other movies that, other franchises that have done well. So I think that, the Tom Cruise is making movies for younger audiences, but I don't know that the younger audiences really care as much about Tom Cruise. I think Top Gun Maverick probably made the money it made was because it was nostalgic for people that maybe grew up watching the 1986 original movie and thought, oh, I want to watch Top Gun again, and I think that's why it resonated. Now, obviously, it had to have resonated with younger audiences too, but, the Mission Impossible series, maybe it just doesn't resonate as much, and maybe some of these franchises don't resonate as much as we think they do, just because they have a backing like the Mission Impossible tag, because I think some people don't really think of it that way, or don't really care about it as much. And I think another, similar situation is like the James Bond franchise. Like, the James Bond franchise is a wildly popular they've made 26 movies or whatever over the course of, 5-6 decades. And I think for a lot of people that are older, baby boomer age, they probably grew up on James Bond, so it's a lot of fun. For younger audiences, though, they might not have, and I think it's pretty reflective. The last James Bond movie, I'm looking at it, it made $774 million worldwide, which is a good box office take, don't get me wrong, but only 160 domestically. So that means in our area, in our country, it only made $160 million. So a lot of that money came from the international box office, and usually the skew isn't 80-20 like it is there. Usually the international skew is like 60% to 40%. So I think it's a testament to say that Americans probably don't care as much for James Bond as they maybe once did, when there wasn't the action blockbuster DC or Marvel movie that came out month after month after month back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, I've heard so little buzz about James Bond now. It's kind of crazy. I don't know. I blame myself for Mission Impossible. Sometimes I don't focus on the storyline, and although I like the action, I get a little bit confused by the storyline sometimes in Mission Impossible. Maybe as part of it is I like a movie where I don't have to think that much about. Give me a storyline, but sometimes the Mission Impossible storyline gets a little bit convoluted in my brain.
It does, yeah.
And maybe I don't think about it well enough, but I don't know. It's a little bit tough. So who knows? want to kind of keep the politics out of this next discussion, but Sesame Street is moving to Netflix. It was a huge staple of PBS's programming. If you look at the political, we don't know what's going on with PBS. There's some debate on where the funding should go and everything else. And let me just say this, and Craig, if you want to say something, go for it. But I think it's ridiculous that we can't fund public programming from the governmental side. I think there's a lot of good services that can provide our kids and everything else. I think when we look at all the stuff we want to fund, there should definitely be a place for public broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if I'm Sesame Street, or if I'm, even looking back at Mr. Rogers, I know 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't as many broadcast options.
Yeah.
But now, since there's a ton of options, since there's a ton of streaming services looking for programming like that, I say good for Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Not that the government shouldn't fund PBS, but I'm sitting here right now from Sesame Street and saying, what the heck? You know what I mean? I don't think we can count on somebody being empowered that could help us out. And obviously, if the Democrats take over next time, maybe they'll be double the PBS. Who knows? But if I'm Sesame Street, I'd say enough of this. Let's go to a streamer that could pay us. We can do more of what we want. And it's sad that they have to do that. We need a public broadcasting. But if I'm some of these people, I would say, screw it. I don't want to mess with you guys anymore. I'm going to take mine to where we have more control. We could probably get paid a little bit more.
Well, I guess the thing that I would say is I'm glad that Sesame Street has been saved. I also love the fact that even though it was saved by a streamer, that Netflix is going to continue running it on PBS. So people that don't have access to streaming or don't have Netflix or whatever that watch the show will still be able to watch the show.
Well, that's good.
They're maybe accustomed to. So that's a great thing. And I'm glad that that's, we talk about these streamers a lot, and, we talk about how much money they have. And I feel like this is a nice situation. And look, I mean, we don't know if like Netflix is going to get kickbacks for something or write-offs or whatever, but at the very least, what they've done is the right thing, which was continue to leave this programming where it's at while still getting the programming on their shows and on their streaming service. HBO, well, I guess it will be HBO Max here in the near future, has multiple seasons of Sesame Street, and I think it's good to see that the show will be found in some capacity somewhere by children across the country, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were allowing PBS to watch it too. Maybe that's the way we get around.
That's what I've been seeing, is that they will still. They said that the episodes will still air on PBS stations and on digital PBS formats as well.
And I'm wondering if the current argument for the government is I don't think MAGA doesn't want to see PBS. I think they just don't like funding certain things, I guess. So maybe that's a way of getting around it, have a Netflix say, hey, we're going to put your programming to ours, but we'll give it back to PBS because we realize the value of PBS. I don't know.
Well, it's, content is king. And, for Netflix, this is a shrewd move to ensure that they, because everybody wants to have programming for all facets of society. They want to be able to say, yeah, Netflix might be known for volume and quantity and over quality, or maybe the sheer number of adult programming. Here they get a children's program that's wildly popular still, that has been around for decades upon decades. And that was one of the feathers in the caps of, HBO Max. When HBO Max debuted, they had Sesame Street. Everybody thinks of HBO as this like adults only kind of television shows. But here, HBO Max is saying, well, look, we've got, kids programming that every kid grew up watching or still grows up watching. So, I mean, that's the benefit. And I think that's one of the things that drew Netflix to this was, we're looking maybe at expanding our audience. Well, what can we offer children? What can we offer anybody that has streaming that needs to put something on for their kids while they cook dinner or while they do something or educational programming? So this is exactly the situation that I think benefits everybody involved in it.
Yeah, and it's now an 11-minute story. It's going to be a single 11-minute story, which is kind of different than before.
Yeah, I mean, I think they usually, and I could be wrong, but a lot of kids programming does like 11, 12-minute programs. Now they might do like 2 episodes in one episode to make it like a full 30-minute broadcast or whatever. The benefits, I guess, for Netflix is that Netflix can just have it be, 11 minutes all one after another and have like, 50 shows or whatever in one season or however they want to do it. I don't know exactly the amount of story. Usually you don't get as many episodes on streamers. Like usually streaming services want fewer episodes and a little bit better quality. But, on something like PBS, PBS kind of churned it out with this programming. But my guess is they'll probably do the 11-minute episodes and give it to PBS, and PBS can run it as an 11-minute episode, and then maybe another episode or show after that to kind of fill time slots. But that's usually because kids just don't have the attention span for a 30-minute show these days, and I think it's easier in smaller bits for them.
Well, and I think that's why you got to support journalism. We talk about from like I work for a TV station that's owned by a company, so support my journalism, support Craig's journalism. He works for a newspaper company with local ties all around the country. It's important to support that, but I'd say at the same time support content creators. I know it's hard to say Netflix because Netflix has got a ton of money they're already spending, but if you like that, keep your Netflix subscription, because they're paying money for Sesame Street. And if nobody buys Netflix, they may drop Sesame Street. And hopefully for Sesame Street's sake, Netflix can hang on to Sesame Street. But sometimes when Netflix picks up a program, we have it for a couple of years and it's gone. So hopefully, Netflix is smart enough to hang on to it for a while, since there's going to be new versions of Sesame Street coming out too, which would be good. And how do we? I guess the sad thing when we think about the lack of federal funding is that could eventually hurt some of this programming because somebody's got to pay for it. And thank goodness Netflix popped in, but you know how it is, and we talk about this in the local news sometimes. Sometimes the funding isn't there, from advertisers to subscribers to other stuff like that, which makes it tough. So I don't know, Craig. I mean, this is another discussion for another day, but like I keep hearing in Congress, they're talking about, hey, maybe let's have funding to help support local journalism or local creators. And yeah, in theory, it's a wonderful idea. But then if you do that, how much control does the government have? And, you might say, well, I don't like the government having control. Well, that becomes the problem when the government starts supporting you. So I don't like the fact that there's not federal funding for PBS. And sometimes I kind of say, I don't know if I want the government telling me, well, funding my programming. Let's have some other people come and fund it. I don't know. I get a little frustrated about the government being part of anything anymore, which frustrates me.
It's nice that they were more or less bailed out here by Netflix. So I'm assuming that there's still a popularity with Sesame Street. Otherwise, it would have probably stopped running by now. Obviously, part of that is the public funding aspect of it, for PBS. But it's good to see that these giant streamers that have what seems like an abundance of cash on hand. Like maybe if Netflix hadn't done it, maybe Apple TV would have done it, or maybe Amazon would have done it. Places that have just money to spend and do spend, and they could have helped save Sesame Street. So it's good to see someone step up and keep this alive.
You used to live up near Cedar Point. I know you're in Tennessee now. have you heard a lot about this new coaster in Cedar Point? Are we excited about this, or
I
what do you
haven't
think?
heard a lot about it. Knew it was coming, but I didn't really, know too much about the Siren's Curse, which it's every now and then Cedar Point needs to change things up a little bit. They're still going to get a lot of popularity and a lot of visitors, which is really helpful to that local economy, and it's really helpful to the local people. Even though when I lived there, there was a lot of times that my wife and I would complain about the traffic and people, inundating that smaller city of Sandusky, with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people every day. But what it did do, though, is it really allowed that city to boom in a way that grew to the point where it could have a Chick-fil-A or other, standard things that maybe if you're in a big city like you are, or I'm in a bigger city now too than where I was, that, kind of gets spoiled by having Chick-fil-A's and multiple places and, whatever it may be. And I think that Sandusky really has benefited. Now, again, living there for as long as we did, my wife grew up there, so she lived there for a long time. And, us together living there for about 6 years or so, it's definitely not fun to have the Cedar Point traffic come in. You definitely notice the differences in the summer when you're on Route 250 and trying to get somewhere in the main drag, and it takes a little longer than it probably should need to, but that's the price you pay for having that tourist attraction there that Cedar Point is. Now, me personally, I'm not a roller coaster fan, so I don't go to Cedar Point, and I don't really care to go to Cedar Point, and I will probably never go to Cedar Point because I'm deathly afraid of heights and I'm deathly afraid of being on a roller coaster. So, I'm sure that it will be a very popular attraction, just not with me.
Yeah, I'm not a big roller coaster guy either, and I'm kind of wondering too. Are these places doing well? I mean, COVID kind of wiped out
Yeah,
the attendance for a while, and
they did.
you keep hearing weird stories even after COVID about how places are doing. Like Kings Island had a bunch of fights there when they opened back up and everything. I mean, I hope these places are doing okay. I don't know.
I think they are. I mean, obviously, I think Cedar Point sold. Cedar Fair's their parent company, I believe, sold. Maybe I think it was to the Six Flags people. Don't I'm not quite 100% sure on that, but I do think that the popularity is still there. And really, what Cedar Point did too was, they utilized their popularity. Now they have like a sports facility out there by them, where they have ball fields, an indoor gymnasium where they have a bunch of tournaments and stuff, and they have baseball fields with parks and things like that. So they've really reinvested into the area, when they were still under the Cedar Fair. And I think they still might be, but they were at least at that point under the Cedar Fair name and, Cedar Point, and they have a bunch of cool things that were brand new, and everybody was, loving them because they realized that, it's a tourist attraction, but then you can also expand on that and have baseball, tournaments and basketball tournaments and have local teams play there and really kind of take advantage and showcase the, some of the new digs they have. So, I mean, kudos to them for, sort of being an entity that would reinvest into the city, because it did mean a lot, I think, to people, where they can, have new parks and ADA accessibility and things like that maybe they didn't have, or it was harder to get those things greenlit by the city or by organizations to pay for it.
All right. Yeah. So good luck to them. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Hey, final story. I didn't realize there's a Whataburger in Cincinnati, but apparently there's a guy from Cincinnati that's suing the Whataburger for $250,000. He received onions on his burger, and he allegedly requested otherwise. Apparently, I think he has a health situation where he can't have onions in his burger or whatever. That's what he's claiming. He's suing for $250,000, Craig. It seems like a lot.
That's a lot of money. It makes me wonder. We have 4 Whataburgers in Clarksville, so
Okay.
maybe, and we live next to a couple, so maybe you have to go to Whataburger. We have gone to Whataburger before. It's pretty good stuff. But yeah, I can understand, like, if this was just sort of this litigious, I didn't want onions and you put onions on it, then I'm suing you. But this does seem like there was a lawsuit because he had the allergic reaction to it. So while it may be excessive, I kind of understand, like, this guy, maybe could have died from it. You just never know what the reaction could be, especially if there's a lot of it. So, you certainly asked for a burger a certain way at a restaurant and you hope to get it that way. And if it's not, then, I guess there can be some repercussions there.
I think you would have to have real big documentation of what these medical issues are. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have a doctor say, my goodness, this guy came in.
Yeah.
He came in because he freaking had onions. And because he had onions, now his heart's not working right, or whatever the medical issues are. I mean, the story, they took it from a USA Today story. I'm reading the USA Today story now. There's not a lot of details about what these medical issues are. Right. And again, I know the media doesn't have access to every single court record, but you would think that there would have to be some documented, hey, here's where he's in trouble for this suit to make sense. Here's the other thing, too. And I'm a picky eater. I don't like stuff like ketchup and mustard. So if I go into a fast food place, I'm always like, hey, hold this, add this, hold this, add that. Okay, no offense to if you're working a fast food restaurant, but a lot of times fast food restaurants are somebody's first job in high school. Mm-hmm. Why are we putting all this onus on these fast food restaurants to make your food right? I mean,
yeah, well, and plus they're probably trained a certain way too, to where, like, you're trained to make a Whopper or a whatever insert, fast food restaurant burger that is made a certain way. So they are probably trained over and over and over again about how to make that specific burger. And then all of a sudden you start working, and then you're like, oh, I don't want this, but I want this, and I don't want this, but I want this. So that probably gets confusing because muscle memory probably takes over and says, I got to put onions on this because this burger has onions, or I've got to put this on this because this burger has this. And I'm sure there's a muscle memory factor. And I'm sure that this person did not put the onions on the burger on purpose. It was probably, again, one of those, like, this is what this burger has, and I'm following it. And yeah, I see the receipt, or I see the order ticket, and maybe the order ticket says no onions, but muscle memory kicks in, and I'm just making this burger the way I was taught how to. So it's probably not easy for some of these people to get away from that. And I get it. I totally get it. And I don't usually bemoan anybody that gets my order wrong to a certain degree. Now, I would be upset if something's missing, but, if something's on there, like, okay, I don't really love onions either. I don't have a reaction to them, but I just don't love raw onions. I would probably be like, I'd prefer them not to be on there, but whatever. Or I could take them off if they're a singular piece or whatever. But, if this person has documentation that says, hey, I'm allergic to onions, or I have a bad reaction to it, then, they might end up losing this lawsuit, because they're countersuing, or at least filing, to say that they need to show, serious documentation to say that this is an issue. And if they don't, then they're going to assume that this person's just trying to cash in on them. And, I think that's the big debate right now, is if this person has the backup of documentation saying, yeah, I'm actually allergic to onions, and while they might not kill me, they can maybe upset my stomach, or maybe give me an illness, or cause a lot of issues. And at that point, you're starting to get into, you're the reason why I had a rough week, or I had a this, or I had a that, and that's why you are suing them, essentially.
But if your health is on the line, don't put your health in the chance of high school drive-through.
But you also, you don't want to say, like, you can say that, but then you also don't want to say, like, are you saying that this person should not go out for a burger or a meal at some point? Like, and they're, it's that, like Burger King's.
You're going to be entirely sure. Like, if onions are going to give you that much of an issue. Now, I know the restaurant can't say that because the restaurant's going to admit that their service sucks if you don't know if you're going to have onions on your sandwich or not.
Right.
But man, if I'm in deep trouble and if I'm not going to get that, I got to be careful. Like right now, I have a heart condition. It's not terribly bad, but it's something I have to be careful about. Well, if there's something I shouldn't be able to eat, I don't want to put in the chances of some fast food place. You know what I mean? I want to make sure I do it right. And maybe you don't eat certain places or whatever. I don't know.
I see what you're saying, but I would also be, and I'm not blaming this person for what happened. I would just say, like, if I personally knew that if I had onions that I could not have them because I could have an allergic reaction to them or something, I probably would say while ordering, like, I can't have onions because they could hurt me.
Right.
Like letting them know how important it is to not have onions on the burger. And then I would even maybe take it a step further by picking up the order and saying, are there no onions on that burger? Just to make sure. And then I would obviously check the burger as well if it would cause me, harm physically. And again, I'm not putting the blame on the person who got the onions that did not order them because, there's a certain level of expectation when you order something that it's going to be prepared that way. Not always going to happen, but I'm not blaming this person for not checking the burger, or I'm not blaming this person for saying that they didn't intimate enough that they can't have onions. But at the same time, me personally, I don't like sour cream. When I go to Taco Bell, I make sure to tell them I don't want sour cream on any of this stuff. And there will be times that I will even say, is there no sour cream in these? Just to make sure that they're aware that I don't want them. I don't want that, and hopefully they'll know, but sometimes they can't really know for sure. And they might just say, there shouldn't be. And I've had that before where I've ordered no sour cream on something, and years ago, I recall a time biting into something and it was sour cream, and I didn't like it, but it sort of is what it is. But, that's the crapshoot you have sometimes with fast food is, their preparedness is preparing the meal the way it's supposed to be prepared. And then sometimes they're just not computing when they see something on the order ticket, maybe that says no onions, no pickles, or extra pickles, or whatever it may be. And they just don't think about it because muscle memory kicks in and they just put in what goes into the actual meal.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Craig, as always, it's been fun. I appreciate it. Anything coming up for you?
No, I mean, Bob Garver's on vacation. So
yes.
Bob Garver, as always, appreciate Bob, but he'll be off for a couple weeks. We'll get back at it after the holiday. I think George Thomas and I will be recording this week as he will give his thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So look for those shows in the future.
All right, sounds good. Hang on for a second, Craig, and ask you about that. For Craig, this is Chris. Thanks for checking us out. Have a great day.